First of all, of course, I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me, because for me it's the first time in Canada, so I'm very happy finally being here. But I should probably mention that many years ago, already, let's say, between Dnipropetrovsk and Kiev and Lviv, I was one of those lucky young Ukrainian historians who received a CEUS fellowship, because, you know, we in Ukraine, we say CEUS. Fellowship, it was for the history of Soviet Ukrainian historiography, and I also remember very well that Yaroslav Gretsak was the one who recommended me, so it's really kind of like coming back to the beginning of my academic writing now. And of course, I should also tell you that I have a big temptation to talk about a situation in Ukraine, but still I will not do that, at least not now. I will focus on the German story, because I think it's really interesting. In some part, I would say telling, and it's also kind of a challenge in itself, if you wish. And of course, in speaking briefly about this German situation, I would very much, let's say, continue or address Professor Magoch's point that there are too many Ukrainian studies centers at the university level in North America. So let us compare this point with the situation in so-called Western Europe, especially in Germany. I would say that the biggest challenge, if we still use this term challenge, despite our optimism, in case of Germany, in my view, would be definitely an institutional one. So if you look at the situation of Ukrainian studies, even broadly speaking, East European studies in Germany, you see that until recently, it was very difficult to find any professorship positions in Ukrainian history, literature, politics, whatsoever. And if you know how the German system works, it's actually crucial to have professors, full professors, appointed to some particular field. There are a lot of people doing Russian studies, of course, some people doing Polish stuff, and so on. And even, you know, in a situation when if you apply for a project, for a grant, the German one or the European one, there is no way to do it without a professor who would at least formally support you. And there's, of course, very much my personal problem as well. And the second institutional challenge related to the first one is the situation with the language teaching. Because if you look at Berlin, for instance, the capital of Germany, a lot of people potentially interested in learning Ukrainian, not just, you know, students, but also journalists, political analysts, and so on. There is no possibility to have Ukrainian language course at the university level on a regular basis. Until now, nothing. Interesting. Now, so when I came to Berlin, it was actually kind of a coincidence, because I'm not a specialist in Germany, maybe now a little bit. So when I came there, it was in 2012, before the Maidan, before all the events that are now, you know, as Tim Snyder said, changed the world. So it was before that, and I've started giving lectures on Ukraine at the Humboldt University. And I should tell you that even before the Maidan, you could see that there was a big interest in attending the lectures. I was also amazed when from first lecture, something like 60 people or something like that came. And sort of like why? Like, come on. Why? Because again, you have no Ukraine at all at the university curriculum level, at least in Berlin. And what's also interesting that I've did it, and I'm continuing doing it, not at the history department, but at the Institute of Slavic Studies. So quite often, paradoxically, I have no time to explain why it's easier to get access, at least for me, to the Slavic studies than to East European history. But okay. Now, what happened after the event? So after the Maidan, after the so-called Ukraine crisis and all the famous public debates, there are some changes, institutional changes. The most notable, of course, are, so now let me briefly mention them. The creation of the new, it's so-called center, in German it would be ZEUS, so Center for East European Studies, in Berlin. They're now like starting their function, a lot of questions about it. And the second story is the story of the, let's say, preservation of the professorship, like, and re-establishing, if you wish, of the professorship in Ukrainian cultural studies in Greifswald, the city in the north, so it's former Eastern Germany, north from Berlin. And what's interesting that in both cases, so this new center and this professorship, which is now attention, which is not full professorship, it's a junior professorship, which means like less than. So you should wait for 5 to 6 years to make it real. We'll see what will happen in 5 years. But both of them were financed by the German Foreign Office. So not by private foundations, not by Ukraine, not by, by German Foreign Office. And maybe I should also mention another like new development is a development in Viadrina University. It's a border university like on the Polish-German border in Frankfurt Oder, Słubice. And there we have, first of all, like this new series of summer schools in Ukrainian studies. You have also Ukrainian language course for the first time since years. And now they are looking for someone to become a professor of, intention is called Entangled Ukrainian History, but it would be also a half position. So not a full professorship, but 50%. So it's kind of, you see, already kind of a paradox. You have like two professorships, but none of them is like a real one, a full one, which is very telling. But still, those three cases, so Viadrina, Greifswald, and Zeus, they are long-term projects. The rest could be, in my view, described as short-term. And if you compare like amount of money given to say Ukraine-related research in Germany, we'll see the absolute dominance of short-term projects. There are millions of euros given for huge conferences, the most expensive hotels in Berlin to be held in the end of December because you should spend the money before the end of the year, and that's it. And it's also interesting that it's much easier to get this huge financial support for something really short-term than to ask for something even for 3 years, not to speak about 5, 10, or, So in this sense, of course, KU's and Huri experience, they're really, impressive and amazing. And it's hard to believe in something like that in the German situation. Yes, especially for people like me, people without regular position at all. Now, coming back to the language issue, I should probably tell you it's interesting because during the last year there was a meeting with the rectors of the Humboldt University. I've been there, and also Ukrainian ambassador to Germany, Andrii Melnik, who is a very good diplomat. It's really, Ukraine is lucky to have such an ambassador in Berlin, believe me. So we've tried to convince the important guys in Berlin that Ukrainian language should be, introduced on the level, and it was very positively accepted, very positive. But they said, we need, at least for the first 5 years, we need a kind of, financial support from, again, like Ukrainian state, some foundation, whatsoever. And as you could imagine, so far all the attempts to find such support failed. So that means that there are no regular Ukrainian language courses in Humboldt University, although they are absolutely ready to establish them, from tomorrow, if you come and good. And if after this 5 years term, it would be, attention, like lately, paid by the university itself. So it's a very good offer, and it was not taken. And now very briefly about, let's say, not institutions, but like intellectual landscape. I, of course, very much support what was said by all the colleagues, and also what was written by Mark von Hagen many, many years ago in this famous article in Slavic Review. So we still have, in Germany it's very visible, a very strong stereotypes. One of them is, of course, like this idea that Russia is actually kind of like continuation of the Soviet Union, which means, for instance, that all these stories, like the story of great victory over Nazism, is the Russian story, not the Soviet one. And it's actually kind of a trap again, because you see, as mentioned by Rory actually, because a lot of Ukrainian internationals will say, we have nothing to do with the Soviet. He said, okay, guys, you have nothing to do? Very good. Then all this, positive, stereotypical view of the Soviet goes to Russia. And what we are left with? We are left with the idea that Ukraine actually means ethnic nationalism. There's a second very strong stereotype, which could be seen in, public debates, famous late Helmut Schmidt comments, and many, 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 many other comments that are very strong in Germany. And I think that the only way to face this challenge is, of course, to, let's say, to minimize the logic of talking or writing about Ukraine only, but to expand the field as much as possible. In other words, like to show the possibility how Ukrainian topics could enrich Jewish, Ottoman, Polish, and last but not least, Russian studies. That's the only way that could at least in some perspective, be a success and bring something new. And in this respect, we could also mention a very, I would say, relevant metaphor by Sergei Plokhий, saying that Ukraine is a gate of Europe, or is a kind of a key to understand what's going on in different parts, or what was going on in different parts of the continent. And of course, so as you see, there are a lot of problems. There are also some changes, but of course, let me be frank about it. Ukraine as a state is almost completely missing, in this, let's say, fight for more Ukrainian studies in Germany. And that is very bad if compared to other post-communist and post-socialist countries. And it's also kind of a challenge, how to convince those people, to be more, engaged and motivated, because otherwise, let's say, German readiness to pay for it, or to participate for it, is also kind of limited and based on their own, expectations and perceptions. Okay, thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much. A tiny bit of disagreement with Rory Finnan. Rory said that there has been no publication on Ukrainian Slavic Review. There has been one, and this was the Forum. Are you talking about literature? I'm sorry. This is my fault there. But there has been, you probably know that the large Forum on Ukraine, which has a title, which has a large article by Tim Snyder, then followed by some discutant, including Andrii Portnov. But this was the second one, or the third one. The first one was initiated in the 60s by the Vanda Sakrudnitsky Slavic Review, and the second one, the most importantly, by Mark von Hagen. And then making a 19, this is kind of here continuity, the history itself. Forums, Marto. I'm not talking about articles, but the forum, because forum important, because forum put questions and talk about agenda. Talking about agenda of Ukrainian studies. As far as I understand the challenges are not only structures are very important, but I believe more important are the questions that we pose, the agenda we formulate, the paradigms we follow. And in this sense, I believe all the three forums did a very significant impact in the sense that they suggested new paradigms, in a way. So, Mark, floor is yours. What now we have to tell us?